some drama, major, significant, I shouldn't even call it drama, because it really is an issue that could impact people across the country. You know, we have this, in my opinion, very silly protocol of something called the debt ceiling, where you have to go through the motions of lifting this thing once you hit a certain amount. And it's not like it's authorizing new spending. You're just saying, all right, we're going to go ahead and do what we need to do to spend the money we have already appropriated. So it's sort of this like accounting gimmick, procedural thing, relic that's put in place that everybody has to go through the motions on. Well, back in the Tea Party era, they started using this as a way on the Republican side to try to garner spending cuts that they wanted and to move towards, you know, their deficit reduction goals. Worked pretty well in terms of the hostage taking. Yeah. They were able to get some deals and get some things they wanted out of the Obama administration. And so now with Republicans back in control of the House majority, it appears that one of the key deals that was struck with the Republican hard right rebels was around using the debt ceiling again to extract spending cuts. Well, this week, we officially technically hit that debt ceiling. Now, that doesn't really mean anything yet, because they can use what they call extraordinary measures to be able to continue to make all the payments that the government ultimately owes. But this shows you this is the beginning of something that's going to be unfolding over the coming months and probably going to come to a head sometime this summer. Now, the White House's position here is pretty hard as far as what they are projecting publicly. They are saying we will only accept a clean debt ceiling increase. That means no combination with any sort of spending cuts, cuts to Social Security, such cuts to anything. We only want a clean debt ceiling increase. We are not open to negotiations. Here's Karine Jean-Pierre staking out that position.
Negotiating, you'll not negotiate anything involving spending?
What we're saying is that this should be done without conditions. It is one of the basic items that Congress has to deal with, and it should be done without conditions. So there's going to be no negotiation over it. This is something that must get done.
So this is something that must be done. We will not have any negotiations. Meanwhile, you had other top House Republicans, including Jamie Comer, staking out a completely, different position, completely at odds with what the White House is saying here, saying they are going to have to budge, and the Senate Democrats are going to have to realize they're going to have to budge because we are coming for those spending cuts. Let's go ahead and put this reporting up on the screen from CNBC about exactly what this means. So they say U.S. will hit its debt limit Thursday, start taking steps to avoid default. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Friday notified Congress officially the U.S. will reach its statutory debt limit next Thursday. After that, they will take those extraordinary measures to prevent a default on our obligations. The Treasury, she says, is not currently able to estimate how long those emergency actions will allow the U.S. to pay for government obligations, but it's unlikely those extraordinary measures will be exhausted before early June. She goes on to say failure to meet the government's obligations would cause irreparable harm to the U.S. economy, the livelihoods of all Americans, and global financial stability. So basically she's saying, listen, we got some time now till June, and then after that, it becomes dicey as to when exactly we will start to fail to pay some of our debt obligations.
Yeah, that's right. And this probably the most important thing that we have seen now is a reporting of a private deal by Republicans. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen from the Washington Post, where this secret deal between effectively the McCarthy holdouts and the GOP leadership would call on the Biden administration to make only the most critical federal payments if the Treasury Department does actually come up on the debt limit. The plan would call on the department to keep making interest payments on debt, which would maintain at least the credit on the international markets. House Republican prioritizations would stipulate that the Treasury continue to make payments on Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits, as well as funding the military. But it would also mean that they would have automatic cuts effectively on everything else, such as Medicaid, food safety inspections, border control, air traffic control like the FAA, as well as thousands of other quote-unquote discretionary programs. Also, here's the real issue, is that all of this is completely unprecedented territory. We never actually did run up to it in the Tea Party era. As far as how all this plays out, I'm just not entirely sure. It does honestly seem to me, Krystal, that the Republicans did prove they proved that they would shoot the hostage, during the McCarthy
about that.
So if I'm the White House, I actually, look, you could say you're not going to negotiate. I think we all know we're going to negotiate. Personally, and I think for the rest of the U.S. economy, we would probably all sleep easier if you guys just came to a deal sometime in the next couple of months. But at the same time, I don't really know how this is all going to play out. I mean, they're very clear, like they're not going to vote for it unless you have some sort of spending cuts. I maybe could see an alternative where House, because also we should remember this. Remember that McCarthy is a weakest speaker, that he doesn't actually control the floor all that much. There is a realm that I would see where maybe you would have like moderate Republicans team up with the Democrats to pass some sort of debt ceiling relief through the Congress in an extraordinary situation. And then, of course, the Democratic Senate could then go ahead and lift the debt ceiling on their part. That's one, possible way we could get out of this. But I think the most likely scenario is that the Republicans are going to force some sort of major discretionary cuts on social spending, almost certainly. Now, do I think that will be politically popular? No. Was it politically popular during the Tea Party era? No, it certainly wasn't. But I mean, look, what did we learn with these guys? Like, they believe what they're saying. So we should take it seriously. Otherwise, we genuinely could go into a default. Although we would be remiss if we didn't talk about #MintTheCoin.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I mean, there is one weird trick to avoid this whole scenario. Truly, it's minting $1 trillion coin. I know it sounds ridiculous, but the debt ceiling is ridiculous. So let's have a ridiculous solution to what's ultimately a ridiculous problem. Will the White House do that? I don't know. I really don't. But if they did, then you would basically diffuse this problem forever. And you wouldn't have the ability of people to take the whole government and the economy, our economy, world economy hostage in order to extract their ideological concessions that they are ultimately demanding. If you judge by history, I think you're right, Saagar. Biden says he won't negotiate, but this is also a man who, has very few actual principled beliefs, but he has this instinct towards comedy and bipartisanship. He likes to be seen as the guy who can make the deal across the aisle, even if it's a deal that you really shouldn't be making. And we saw this under the Obama-Biden administration. They offered a deal to the Republican House caucus at that point that was horrible. It included cuts to Social Security in particular. And fortunately, actually, the Tea Partiers wanted even more. They rejected the deal. And so we didn't end up with that terrible deal. Their intransigence actually sort of saved us from what was a horrific grand bargain that would have been wildly unpopular and really bad for a lot of people. So do I think that Biden will ultimately decide he wants to come to the table and try to work together with these fools? Yeah, I think it's very possible. So we will see. There hasn't been any indication yet that that Joe Biden himself and the Biden administration is interested in pushing the sort of legal bounds of what they are able to do with executive power.
Yes.
In terms of actually achieving sort of left or progressive or just mainstream working class goals. So I'm looking at his history and how he's operated in Washington, both as vice president and also as senator, I think it's more likely that he looks to cut a terrible deal.
Well, certainly just because, look, we're already on the brink of recession, possibly might already be in a recession, depending on the technical definition. In terms of how people are feeling it, inflation is still, it's gone down slightly, but it's still not great for working people. A debt default would effectively, look, in terms of market crash, liquidity dries up, banks wouldn't be able to make lends, people would not be able to have mortgages, you would have a massive crash of the stock market all across the board. But, it's not just rich people who would suffer. A lot of people, the liquidity crunch would be similar to what happened possibly even in 2008, on top of a downgrade and basically not even a breakdown of the global financial system, but a fraying of the global financial system, which would be bad for the US dollar, which means it would have impacts on trade. And actually that would spiral into problems with oil markets and Russia, Ukraine, Saudi Arabia. There's all kinds of interesting implications. So it's not a joke for the United States to default on its debt. It does look like, though, that the Republicans are trying to have their cake and eat it too, where they wouldn't technically default. They would continue to make the interest payments, but they would just force spending cuts in discretionary, which, look, even then, you're effectively in a so-called government shutdown. Well, one of the lessons I think I really saw throughout all of the various government shutdowns we've now had since, the 1990s, is it never really came out on the side politically of the people who seem to be holding the government hostage.
Yeah.
So the Newt Gingrich shutdown did not work out to the benefit of Newt Gingrich. The Tea Party shutdowns absolutely worked to the benefit of Obama because they were blaming the Tea Party. They would go and close national parks or whatever and be blame the Tea Party.
Yeah.
And the public really turned against him. Also, don't remember this, the Trump shutdown did not work out in Trump's favor at all for the whole border wall wall situation.
That's
He shut the
right.
government down for 3 weeks, didn't get what he wanted, then he
Had
caved.
to totally capitulate because it was a disaster.
Completely
for him.
capitulated because
That's right.
the public
Forgot
was
about that.
freaking out. So I just think any side which seems to be holding the government hostage for basic services, and seniors really freak out about this stuff, they generally politically don't benefit. So that would be my one word of caution to the House Republicans.
Two other pieces on this, because I do think it's important to understand some of the mechanics here. First of all, what it reminds me of is the situation we covered pretty closely here with Liz Truss in the UK.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Where they floated this quote unquote mini budget, which was this, the same sort of politics as the Tea Party, same sort of ideology, this sort of like deficit hawk, like fiscal austerity. And so she was going full steam ahead and they were going to institute this mini budget. And because our financial systems are so complex and so interconnected, there were all kinds of side effects of this budget and market crash that led to what looked like a real catastrophe for the British economy, with huge impacts on pensioners and all sorts of others that no one really foresaw in advance. But you had this cascading domino effect because all these pieces are interconnected in such a complex way that really no one has the full picture of how all these pieces fit together. And so I think you could have a similar dynamic here where even if they're able to come up with this prioritization schedule, no, we're still going to pay the bondholders or whatever, the fact that you have the U.S. government defaulting on its obligations, whether it's to bondholders or to seniors or to veterans or whoever it is, that can have massive cascading ripple effects that no one really understands how those impacts are all going to play out. That's number one. Number two, the whole concept of prioritizing our payments. So it's like, okay, we'll pay the interest so we don't technically default, but we're going to cut over here and not over there. You're talking about like 10 million payments. Okay, incredibly complex situation. This has never been done before. They had an aide in that article that we had up from the Washington Post who was an aide to Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, who's a Republican, who studied this closely because they were trying to figure out how they could do this. And he said after studying it closely, he realized huge numbers of people would be hurt immediately with no good way to pick between options such as forcing hospitals to deal with the cessation of Medicare payments or depriving the Defense Department of funding. Studying this in 2011 convinced us this would be a really bad idea and something we really did not want to happen. We didn't end the exercise saying this is feasible and smart. We said, let's avoid this at all costs because it's going to be a disaster. So again, this is a Republican who studied this previously and came away thinking like, we should not under any circumstances ultimately go there. And then, politically, you can see how this would be a field day for Democrats. Oh, you're going to pay bondholders, their wealthy financiers, You're going to pay them their interest payments, but you're going to cut people off of Medicaid and not allow them to have their hospital bills paid. You're going to cut kids off of their children's health insurance or off of their free lunch program, but you're going to pay these wealthy financiers. Those are your priorities. So even, we're getting a little over our skis at this point, but this is what is reportedly in the deal that was struck with the McCarthy holdouts, and now Speaker McCarthy, was to come up with how you would prioritize these payments, effectively broadcasting that we are going to go to the wall, we are willing to go over the ledge, and this is our plan ultimately to deal with it.
Yeah, no matter what, just pay very close attention. We'll cover it very closely in the next couple of months. Just because the consequences, the tail risk of something like this are just so high that we have no choice but to.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.